We have 5A, ballot proposition to propose a 3/4 cent sales tax for general municipal purposes. Do we have a staff report? I'm sorry, do we have any public comment, actually? Do we have public comment?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Yes, please.
Nancy Curry.
Good evening again. I support this ballot initiative to increase our sales tax from 9.5% to 10.25%. We desperately could use additional money for our general fund. It's been estimated that Monterey Park would increase the sales tax that would increase our income to $1.6 million of our general funds. Please consider this, and we need the money. Thank you very much.
Do we have any further comments, requests?
No further speakers.
Okay, thank you, clerk. Staff, presentation, please.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Let me frame this item before I pass it over to our Assistant City Manager. The community outreach team that will be speaking tonight and providing you the presentation have walked through the financial outlook and the future challenges the last few months with the community. And I'd like to emphasize, and they emphasize several key points. Help from the federal government with the ARPA funds will end, which is one-time funding. In 2023 budget, the ARPA funds were used to help us have a balanced budget. That will soon go away, and we will no longer have that funding source. The marketplace revenues allowed us, during the time of COVID, to pay our bills and remain status quo for operations and service to the city. As a full-service city, calls for all services have increased, and responding with less staff continues to occur. Repeatedly in our numerous community meetings from our chief of police and other first responders, there have been an increase in calls for medical emergencies, crime, and also homelessness. These concerns were also echoed both in our forum of participants and in the opinion research conducted. I would like to introduce our Assistant City Manager, Inez Alvarez, and after the presentation by the team, they will hand it back for me for some closing comments, and then shortly after that, we can take questions, or if council chooses, you can listen to public comment, but I think we've already taken care of that. But Inez?
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. This item's presentation is actually going to be given by a team that has been working on this item actually since late 2021. So we've been working together on the potential of this item to come before you. So I will turn it over. Let me introduce our team tonight that we have with us. We have Martha Garcia, Director of Management Services, Diana Garcia, our City Librarian, and we have two consultants that the city has hired to work with us. One is, they were hired to work with us on community outreach and public opinion research. And we have with us tonight Richard Bernard. He's with FM3. He's going to be joining us virtually. And also we have Rob Karinke. He's with Grassroots Lab. And so I'm going to turn the presentation over to him now. Rob?
Thank you, Inez. And thanks, members of the City Council and members of the public for joining us tonight. As Inez mentioned, we've been conducting community outreach really in earnest for the last 6 months. And I wanted to walk through some of the outlines of that outreach effort, as well as some of the feedback that we received. I want to lead off with thanks both to the Assistant City Manager, as well as Martha and Diana, who you guys are going to hear from in a moment, but also to many members of the city staff, Chief Gordon, Chief Hollick, Captain Weiss, Robert Aguirre, and many others who helped us present in these meetings. They brought a lot of expertise, were able to answer a lot of the community's questions, and it was really a very robust effort. In total, we hosted a series of 18 meetings. The first few were virtual. I'll walk through them in a bit. But it was a very robust program, particularly for a city the size of Monterey Park. I've worked in a lot of cities and counties across the state. This is a very broad effort. As Inez mentioned, that we had hundreds of participants across the meetings. Some were extraordinarily well attended with 50, 60 participants. Others were more intimate with smaller participation. But overall, we were in every council district of the city. Virtual events and in-person events. We also promoted these events in a variety of ways and really tried to utilize as much of the city's communications channels as we could. We advertised them in the Cascades newsletter, on the city's website, via social media, various different kinds of flyers, and we also distributed a mailer to every household in the city, and I think it went to all businesses as well. The setup of the meeting was to educate residents on the services that the city provides. Monterey Park is a full-service city. We really tried to draw out what the city does, the services it provides that differ from those that the county provides or the state, how all those services are funded, what the city's budget is comprised of, and what the forecast of those finances are over the coming years, and to try and engage the residents in a dialogue about their priorities, and to walk through how the city is trying to meet those priorities and the challenges that it faces. This is an example of the mailer that we sent to every resident. It was in English, Spanish, and Chinese. It advertised the first round of our forums and invited folks to attend. There's a QR code on the mailer where they could actually view virtual events, recordings of the events, and also engage in a survey that we made available on the city's website and via other means. Also had a letter from City Manager Bo, who I neglected to mention at the beginning, was also a strong participant in these meetings and very essential in answering community's questions. Go ahead. This is a listing of our meetings. The first 5 of them were virtual. The first in-person meeting we actually had in this room. It was a meeting of the city's commissioners as a joint commissioner meeting. From there, we went throughout the city to community centers, to elementary schools, the library. We responded to invitations that were sent from community groups that we could go present at. And we had a fairly standard presentation, as I highlighted, that talked through the city's budget, its services, but then always offered an opportunity for residents to give input. And I'm going to walk through some of the input that we received in the latter forums, where we had an exercise that people could participate in, where they actually got to allocate like a monopoly money resources. We gave them all $6, so to speak, and they could allocate it across 12 different priorities. And in the earlier events, we also had a survey, a more formal survey that Diana will walk through. Just some photographs. Again, there were 18 of these meetings. We gave just a few photographs here to show you the kind of participation. You can see Captain Weiss, I think, is featured in both of those. And I'm gonna keep going here if you want to go to the next slide. Yeah, so again, there were a number of ways that we solicited feedback from the community. Richard Bernard from FM3 is going to talk about a scientific survey that was done. I mentioned that there was also an online survey and a paper survey that folks could respond to, and Diana's going to walk through some of those. But I mentioned the exercise with the dollars. This was the feedback from that, and this was a live exercise that folks could participate in. At the conclusion of our meeting, we had posters across the back room at all of these meetings, and they could go along and they could allocate dollars to these various resources. Here's what we found. The number one issue that the community was telling us was a priority to them was preventing theft and property crimes. That was followed by a number of issues that were sort of close together in priority: maintaining 911 emergency response services, protecting local water, and upgrading the city's water treatment plant. There's an other category that included things like the Olympic-sized swimming pool, which I believe was mentioned earlier in the meeting, dog park, fiber optic internet, various kinds of infrastructure, economic development, attracting different kinds of supermarkets. It was a bit of a catch-all bucket. Other issues that were listed as a priority were keeping public areas safe and clean, addressing homelessness, retaining and attracting local businesses and jobs, and then in kind of the lower tier, while still a priority, maintaining programs for seniors, maintaining library services for youth, upgrading life-saving emergency rescue equipment, improving the city's cybersecurity, and protecting neighborhoods from hillside fires. Some of the priorities that were expressed in the forums verbally when we would ask for questions. Among that was amenities that are dilapidated. And again, the community pool, it was brought up repeatedly in meetings, and there were some very dedicated advocates for that one particular amenity. Many residents discussed streets, the state of the streets and roads and potholes. Homeless issues came up, I think, in virtually every meeting, and Chief Gordon and Captain Weiss were always very good in addressing those issues with the community. Many residents brought up vacant properties and storefronts. Many had questions about specific corners or shopping centers in their neighborhood. Better internet came up very frequently. And then, as I mentioned earlier, also attracting new kinds of businesses to the city was expressed as a priority. Somewhat different from the questions we received, but were concerns, because we were walking residents through the budget, through the potential for the need for different revenue, and some of the questions that arose out of that. Inflation and recession concerns. And I will note that this was an issue that evolved, that was not mentioned in the earlier part of our work, but did as it became a greater part of the news cycle, was mentioned more often in the latter parts. Economic development, and what is the city's plan, what is its engagement plan to attract new businesses, and what is already kind of on the horizon. The Marketplace Center was often mentioned, and there was a lot of discussion around that and questions about how that was playing out. Residents seem to be very well aware of the fact that the city has a tax split with Montebello, with certain with Costco and so forth, and they asked how any new revenues would be split or what's the status of that split now. And we also educated residents on the relative rate of existing tax between Monterey Park and other cities, and that engendered a discussion too about the relative advantages of that versus the revenues brought in. I'm going to hand it off to Diana now, and she's going to talk about another little bit more formal survey that we engaged in.
Thank you. As Rob alluded to, in addition to the exercise that we did in the community forums, we also distributed a community priorities survey. And so this survey was distributed to residents in a variety of means. We had it available in paper copies at our city facilities as well as at the meetings. And we also had it available online to complete. And it was available, of course, in our 3 community languages: English, Spanish, and Chinese. In total, we had 445 responses from the community that we collected between the months of March and June of 2022. So these are the results of the survey. We had 12 priorities that we asked our residents to rank in order of importance. So they could rank it between 1 and 4, 1 being a low priority, 2 being medium, 3 being high, and 4 being very high priority. These are the same priorities that we had asked our residents to vote for in our community forums and the later community forums. As you can see from the results of this survey, our residents ranked all of these services as high or very high priorities for them in Monterey Park. So we've got up at the top, echoing the results of the in-person exercise, preventing thefts and property crimes, protecting local drinking water, keeping public areas safe and clean, and maintaining 911 emergency response systems. And then grouped below that, but still as a high priority, retaining and attracting local businesses and jobs, upgrading life-saving emergency rescue equipment for our paramedics and first responders, addressing homelessness, improving cybersecurity, protecting our neighborhoods from hillside fires, maintaining library services, and maintaining programs for our seniors. We also included a question at the end where they could give us additional feedback in addition to voting for their priorities. And some of the feedback that we received, we actually received a lot of comments, probably about 200, with lots of different priorities for residents. But some of those included affordable housing, dog park, speed limits on our local streets, speed bumps, improving that safety. Traffic was an issue that came up often. Climate change, our pools in the community programs and events, improving quality of life, parks and playgrounds, internet service, and walkability were some of the themes that we saw brought up over and over again in those comments. That's the end of my portion, and I'm going to pass it on to Richard Bernard from FM3, who's joining us virtually.
Thank you very much. Next slide. So I'm here to talk about the statistically valid quantitative survey that we conducted. This is a follow-up survey, a tracking survey from the baseline survey that you may recall I presented earlier in the year, last year. We conducted the survey between May 10th and the 25th of this year. It was a dual mode survey, which means a portion of the respondents were randomly chosen to conduct the survey online, and a random portion were chosen to conduct it on the telephone. We completed a random sample of 440 City of Monterey Park voters who are likely to vote in a November 2022 election based on their past voter history or if they've recently registered to vote. And the margin of error for the entire sample is plus or minus 5.2%. We contacted folks by telephone, emails, and text invitations. And of course, we offered the survey in English, Chinese, and Spanish. And if you're very quick and notice something doesn't quite equal 100%, I blame that entirely on rounding error. Next slide. We began the survey as we did the previous survey. Next slide. Asking about basically the mood of the electorate. We wanted to know if they generally thought things were headed in the right direction in the city and subsequently their neighborhoods, or if they thought things were off on the wrong track. The dark green is the right direction, the blue is the wrong track, and the brighter green is the folks who volunteered they didn't know. You'll notice that we have the May 2022 results, which is the current survey, and then the November 2021 results, which was the baseline survey. What's striking to me here, you could see a slight majority say that things in the city are headed in the right in the right direction, and in their neighborhoods, a little slightly more mid-50s in terms of right direction in their neighborhood. What's striking to me here is that in spite of the fact that we've had multiple months of 40-year high cost of living index and very high gas prices, and I'm seeing in a lot of cities where their baseline survey has declined, their tracking survey in terms of right direction has declined since their baseline survey. Yours has been very resilient and consistent across surveys, with at least majority saying things are headed in the right direction. That tells me that this is a well-run city and that generally people are happy in spite of the fact that economically we're experiencing some tough times. Next slide, please. And we also, before we get into the ballot question, wanted to get a sense conceptually if they even really think you need additional funds to provide the level of city services that residents in the city need and want. On the left-hand side are the November 2021 numbers, where 66% said there was a great or some need for additional funds. So there is an understanding that there is need for funds. In May 2022, there's an increase of 6 points, but just slightly above the margin of error in the perception of a great or some need. So even though we're about to show you a question about sales tax and whether people would support it or not, you start at the benefit of people disproportionately perceiving that additional funds are needed for the city. Next slide, please. And now in the following slide, please. I'd like to show you the placeholder ballot question we asked. Legally, you're only allowed a 75-word ballot title and summary. Here, we read this to respondents on the phone, or they read it if they were online, and effectively, we were asking if they would support a 3/4 cent transaction and use tax, commonly known as the sales tax, generating approximately $6 million annually. Now, it's a 50+1 measure that the survey is considering. So legally, you're not allowed to promise where the money would go, but you can provide illustrative examples to show what traditionally general fund money is used for. The choices of services that are included here, such as 911, emergency safety response, conducting neighborhood park police patrols, helping prevent thefts and property crimes, and the like, are items that your residents, your voters, indicated in the baseline survey, which were priorities to them, and many of them showed up in the previous research that the previous speakers indicated. Next slide, please. So we read this to them if they were on the phone or they read it online, and we said, if there were an election today, would you vote yes in favor or no to oppose? If everyone could just bear with me and look at the right-hand side, that's the May 2022 numbers, I'll explain the results. So if they said they would vote yes in favor, we asked them, is that definitely or probably yes? Because we want to know the intensity of support. And if they said they would vote no, we asked them, is that definitely or probably no? Because we want to know the intensity of the opposition, i.e. the percentage who say definitely no. And if they were undecided, we pushed them a little. We said, well, would you vote yes? Would you lean yes or would you lean no? If they said they would lean yes, we put them in the yes camp. If they said they'd lean no, we put them in the no camp. And then in the case of the May 2022 survey, on the initial vote, 5% said they were undecided and needed to know more. So on that initial vote, just hearing or reading that ballot summary that I just showed you, 63% said they would vote yes, 32% said they would vote no, and 5% were undecided. If you can compare it to the left-hand side now in November 2021, when we asked them that ballot question, it's virtually no different statistically over time. So in spite of the fact, we're going through 40-year highest cost of living in 40 years, as well as the fact there's high gas prices and concerns about recession. This measure, at least with just hearing that ballot summary, is very resilient and continues to receive at least 6 in 10 saying yes, and bearing in mind that the margin of error is plus or minus 5.2, you're way above that margin of error in terms of support. Next slide, please. I thought it would be important, because I'm presenting to the City Council, that you have a sense of where the level of support is in your city. This slide looks at the level of support on the initial vote by City Council district. The green bar are the folks who said definitely, probably, or lean no on the initial vote. The blue bar are the folks who said definitely, probably, lean yes. The green vote is total yes. The blue bar are the total no, definitely, probably, or lean no, and the gray are the pure undecided. And then you could see each City Council district there, and the percentages underneath those numbers of City Council district are the percentages we anticipate that will make up of a likely November 2022 electorate. And as you can see, looking at the green bar across City Council districts, there is support across the city, with the strongest support being in City Council District 3. However, every one of these City Council districts, in spite of the larger margin of error, support exceeds opposition by a considerable amount. Next slide, please. And so now, in this part of this presentation, I wanted to present some educational statements. As you know, the city cannot advocate, but they can certainly educate. And we thought it would be important to simulate educational outreach in order to show you the impact on level of support. So we had a number of statements that we presented, and we randomly presented it to the respondents. And after each one, we asked them if it would make them more inclined to vote yes on the measure. If they said it would make them more inclined, we asked them as much more inclined, which is the green, or somewhat more inclined, which is the blue. And I've aggregated the total more inclined on the right-hand side. You'll notice we asked similar questions to the 2021 survey, and you can see, again, fairly strong resiliency, consistency across the surveys. Now, talking about the substance, the words in the parentheses, quality of life, local control, accountability, and in a moment, but not now, the words crime, streets, and water are simply for us in our presentation. We did not read it to them, or nor did they read it if they were online, but it gives you a sense of what the statement was about. Among the lead statements, of which you have many, which tells me you have a really compelling story to tell because voters in your city are very persuaded by much of your story. Among the top themes that voters reacted positively to is the fact that this measure will help them maintain the quality of life in terms of services that they expect in the city, making the city a better place to live, work, and raise a family. Local control was very important. I know the council knows this, but perhaps at the time, many of your voters don't know that right now, LA County collects $10 million from the last 3 sales taxes, but only receives from Monterey Park, but only receives 16 cents for every dollar in return. All this money would be collected and kept locally for local decision makers such as you to decide how the money is spent because you have a better sense of what the issues are in your community. And of course, accountability is very important. People don't vote for a measure because there's accountability, but they're inclined to vote against the measure if there isn't accountability. And so ensuring that there's strict accountability in this measure goes a long way in terms of level of support. Next slide. We also presented some statistics about crime in the city, the quality of your streets, of which 1/3 of the streets have been rated as fair, poor, very poor, and the fact that the money could be used to help local water supplies. All of those messages strongly impact people's views about supporting the measure. Next slide, please. So after we simulate education, we re-ask that ballot question that I showed you earlier. On the left-hand side was that initial vote that you saw that I went through after just seeing ballot summary. It was 63% yes, 32% no, 5% undecided. And then after education, basically telling your story in a non-advocacy way, support goes up 5 points to 68%. No drops from 32 to 25, so 7-point drop. And knowing that the margin of error is plus or minus 5.2 indicates that you're above that margin of error and that with education, this measure could be viable. Next slide. These are my conclusion slides. Next slide. So Monterey Park voters overall feel very positive about the direction of the city comparatively to many other cities where the view of right direction is below 50%. You are not there, and there's a consistency in spite of the fact that we've been experiencing many months of high gas prices and high CPIs. Most continue to think the city has significant need for funding. As a matter of fact, 72%, close to 3 in every 4 said there's a great or some need. More than 6 in 10 voters would approve a 3/4 cent sales tax measure presented with the 75-word ballot label that I presented to you. Monterey Park's voters responded strongly to statements, particularly about providing funding to maintain the high quality of life in the city and that funds must be used locally rather than taken by the county or other jurisdictions, and that would include strong accountability. In sum, these findings suggest that the potential ballot measure is viable. At this point in November 2022, as voters regard it an appropriate way to fund local services that ensure their quality of life and community safety. Of course, I don't have a crystal ball and I don't know what we'll have in 5 months in terms of all this the economic situation, but nonetheless, at least at this point in our juncture, it's clear to me that this measure is resilient and there is support in the city. And I'll pass it back to the colleagues.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'll be speaking about the budget needs and concerns. Next slide, please. So the city's fiscal year 22-23 operating budget is $123.6 million, and of that, about 2/3 is from dedicated funds. Dedicated funds means funds, for example, water, sewer, gas tax, those are funds that are received by the city but must be spent on specific purposes. About 50.5 million of the 123.6 million is from general fund, and that is that revenue is used to fund core services for the city. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk a little bit about the 50.5 million. Of the 50.5 million, about 58% is for public safety, and that includes police, fire, emergency medical response, and anything related to public safety. About I can't see it. About 14% is for public works and public improvements, capital improvements, and that includes, for assistance for roads, streets, piping, and other items like that. And the remaining 28% is for other items such as parks, recreation, the library, city planning, and administration. Next slide, please. So one of the questions that we were asked when we were out in the community was, what about grants? Can grants provide more, can grants supplement the general fund a little bit more? In general, we get about 3% of our operational budget is generally from grants. And in the past 12 months, we've received these grants, which includes $268,000 for transportation, traffic safety, and streets. It includes $988,000 for community development. It includes $86,000 for recycling, $80,000 for literacy, and in a span of 5 years, we've received $11 million for water. We've also went out and submitted applications for about $200,000 more in grants, but those grants were denied. Next slide, please. A little bit, I want to talk about our revenues versus our expenditures. So the slide that you have before you, this shows that the city anticipates expenditures will begin to exceed its anticipated revenues beginning in fiscal year 23-24. In fiscal year 22-23, when it was adopted as a balanced budget, meaning a balanced budget means that expenditures are expected to be equal or less than anticipated revenues. The city was able to present a balanced budget for this fiscal year because the ARPA funds were used to supplement the general fund. ARPA funds are one-time funds and must be used by the year 2024. If a sales tax measure were to pass, it would take effect in no later than July of 2023 and would allow the city to continue to present a balanced budget with no impact to city services or city reserves. And I'm done with my presentation. I'll pass it on to our city manager.
Mayor, Council, I'd like to, thank the community outreach team. They've worked extremely hard to get the word out. We've spent numerous nights and weekends getting the word out. Team, thank you very much for working so hard to get us to where we're at right now. You saw in the presentation that there were many priorities, and some of the priorities we probably realized, but we didn't really realize that it was so high. The priorities continue to increase, and our capacity to deliver has been the same. What we're looking to do is increase our capacity to meet some of those priorities and also expectations by the community. You heard from our Management Services Director, Martha Garcia. We're facing some increased pressures on our reserves. It's estimated that 57% of the people that shop here in Monterey Park are from outside shoppers. With all of these issues, many of which are not new to you or unique to Monterey Park, the most important question is why now? We believe the physical case is increasingly clear by our presentation for the reasons that I described and also the information presented to you. We also believe the timing is increasingly critical. Many cities have raised their taxes. in recent years because they faced the similar challenges. But also the recognition that state and county, school, and even special districts may compete for sales tax dollars. For example, LA County collects approximately from Monterey Park $7 million annually for measures R and M. We receive $1.3 million annually. A huge disparity between what the county collects and what we get back. The county is also one of the agencies that could increase taxes. We hear increasingly concerns from local government and advocates in Sacramento that the business community may run a ballot measure that will curtail cities' ability to raise revenue. City Council must then weigh the pressures on the budget, resources that are available versus surrounding communities. Without a doubt, uncertain economic time will be a factor as we move forward. Balancing the budget, collecting additional revenue is extremely important. This concludes my closure to the presentation. The community outreach team is here to answer any questions. We also have Richard online for FM3. We'll be happy to answer any questions that City Council and the Mayor may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, outreach team and staff, for the presentation. Colleagues, I'm sure we have many questions and comments. Let's see, Councilman Yu, you have the mic.
Yeah. With almost all city has already passed the sales tax measure 2 years ago. I support the increase of our sales tax measure because of 3 reasons. Number 1, sales tax is being charged by people who spend money in Monterey Park, not just our residents, which majority is our visitors. But the money can be used all in Monterey Park. Second, from the 9.5 sales tax that we receive, only 1% being used in our city. Other has been taken by the state and county. But if we can increase to 0.75% at this time, the whole increase can be used for our city. So number 3, if we do not pass the measure, that means we don't want the additional sales tax. Then the LA County, the LA community colleges may be able to increase the tax to 10.25% and take the 0.75% from us. That's why so many cities has passed the sales tax measure 2 years ago. Imagine if more visitors come to Monterey Park to spend money. We have more traffic, higher crime rate, and road repair costs. And our public safety staff will need to go up for the expense. We as Monterey Park residents, we need the additional income to pay for higher costs of expense. So please, let all pass the measure at this time so that we can improve our community with more resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Ryu. Any other councilmembers? Councilman Chan, you have the mic.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, the team, for the presentation. I've been also participating in one of the meetings where the residents talk about their concerns and everything, so I hear them, and I do support the put this into November ballot. Let the voters decide if the city will increase the tax. But for me personally, we need it because, as you can see in this chart, projected revenues versus expenditures, we are in a deficit in the next few years. If we don't have some extra revenues, we may have to cut back some services, which I don't think we wanted. I don't think all the residents would like to see that we cut back in our services because we are a good city, a full service city, and we provide the public safety and all the public services to all the residents. And so this tax increase is needed. And the most important thing is that 57% of this sales tax is coming from people from outside the city. So we are kind of like the minority in contributing to the revenue. So why not use some others' money for our own use? As you can see in the presentation, that the county is not really giving us the fair share that we pay, and we're only getting, a percentage of what we're supposed to get back. That we pay more to the county than we get back from the county. So, but this 0.75% increase will be 100% to our city at the city's discretion. And we have already mentioned that this money will remain in the city and will be accounted for, and transparency and everything will be enforced, so that people will know exactly where the money going, and it is not going to be a waste. And we need that money to continue a good service to all the residents. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councilmember Chan. Any other my colleagues? Councilmember Liang, you have the mic.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll try to be brief. I'm also in support of this measure. I think just if you think about historically, the past 10 years here in Monterey Park, almost about the time that Peter and I would have been serving when we finish in November, I'm certain that all the residents have seen a lot of the growth that we've had in the city. The marketplace, which I remember when we were knocking on doors in 2013 and talking about that, how cynical a lot of the residents were, saying that that's never going to happen. They've been working on that for years. But being the eternal optimist, I was always kind of cheering for that. And, it took many generations, but we were fortunate to be the one to cut the ribbon, to break the ground, and to make that happen. I think that also, as the years have progressed, people have seen, for example, Courtyard Marriott has opened. It's a very successful location. We have our Atlantic Times Square, before we came on, but that was also part of the shifting and growth of the community. We have our Raising Cane's. We have Celadon project moving forward. So, while in these past 10 years we've worked really and focused on bringing in some of those types of businesses that our residents have asked for a number of years, for creating an environment in the city of Monterey Park that our residents can be proud to be part of. Not only the business communities, but our public safety, both our fire departments and our police department, in keeping our communities safe. I think now is the time really to move forward on this. It's really an investment into the city. Not only are we talking about bringing in businesses, but we're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about public safety, and also to be able to maintain the current level of service that we currently provide to all of our residents. And the question that was asked earlier, I know the city manager asked, why now? I think many of you are aware of, the financial condition, the inflation. I think it was 8% last time I was looking at it. And with all of these financial struggles happening, it's not just our city, it goes throughout the state and the county. It also is important to do it now. As Yvonne, Councilmember, you mentioned, there were a number of cities who had passed this 2 years ago, which basically ensured that those tax dollars were going to stay in the city, those cities. We need to, at this time, support this measure as well to ensure that we secure this funding, and especially now, because we think about, as some of the examples, some of those measures we voted for the county, supporting homelessness, et cetera, those tax dollars are leaving our city. And, why now? We need to secure it now in this crisis time before the county or other agencies get the idea to say, well, maybe it's time, we're struggling, we need to get more tax dollars, let's go hit up all the cities that haven't passed their measures already. So I think the timing is right for that. I think that there is a level of urgency for that. We are very proud of the community that we work to ensure that services are provided, that we have safety, that we have with our community and Parks and Rec services for, our in the parks, our senior centers, all of those things. I think no one can deny that we've worked along with the staff to ensure that those services are at the highest level and that our residents experience a high level or a high quality of living when they're here in Monterey Park. So I'm here to support this measure. I think that the timing is right. I think the timing it's critical at this point before anyone gets any other ideas to encumber our tax dollars for other endeavors. At this point, we have the opportunity to secure it, as a number of cities have done already, to keep that tax revenue in the city and to be able to use that to continue to enhance and expand on the services and the quality of life that we already provide for the city. So I stand in support, and I want to commend all the staff for their work. It was, I know you did a number of outreach events, which I think is really important because the community needs to know what's going on. And as the presentation had illustrated, that when people were educated about what was going on, their likelihood to support it went up. And part of that education is the city's responsibility. And I just again want to commend all of you for your dedication and your time, and making this an important thing not only for the city but for as your team to get through. So thank you for that. I stand in full support.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Any further comments? Hearing none. Let me then add my comments to the conversation. This issue, certainly I have been thinking about for a long time now. And like many of my colleagues, I have been attending the community meetings to hear resident concerns, as well as to myself be educated on the city's fiscal situation. And, I often, when I think about, what drives my decision-making on policy, it actually goes back to even why I ran for office, my colleagues ran for office. And I think oftentimes the commonality is that we want to do our part to contribute to make our community a better place for our residents. And, I think all of us, I know certainly every morning when I check my city email, oftentimes what I hear from residents are, how can we do more? And I think that there are several issues that seem to always stand out, that I'm sure my colleagues and those on city staff here often, number one, how do we enhance our public safety because of concerns about safety in our neighborhoods, the traffic safety for those who are pedestrian, those who drive on our streets. How do we extend and maintain library services? Just this morning, when I checked my city email, I had a resident who said, she grew up in Monterey Park, family still lives here, is a student, and asked, Mayor, how can we extend library hours to not just herself, but to many residents who rely on the services that our library provides. And we are very blessed that we are one of the few communities in the region that has its own library services. I've had constituents in my own district have asked, I noticed that one of the parks that I take my children to, the playground was removed. And we understand that, probably because the equipment was old, but are we doing anything to bring a replacement playground? And, I will say that those are issues that sometimes keep me up at night because, again, all of us who run, who want to represent, we do so with the best intentions. and yet we have, as was once described in one of my public policy courses in college, was we have wickedly challenging issues. All communities do. And because they're wickedly hard and challenging, I think we do have to then ask ourselves, have we exercised all policy tools at our disposal? And I know that our city staff, at the directive of the city council, we are oftentimes asking ourselves, well, is there a way in which we can find more funding via grants, bring more businesses? And I think that we will be derelict if we did not look at all policy tools at our disposal. And the conversation we're having tonight is one that is not just limited to the 4 members sitting on this dais, but depending on the action we take tonight, it will become a conversation in the community. And I hope that as residents, as those who live in this community, work in this community, that we will take a very close view about how can we move this community forward, and in a direction that will, I think, reinforce the city's motto above us, which is pride in the past, faith in the future. And I would like to hope that as residents, we could live up to those ideals that we, all of us, operate and believe in, and when we sit up here. Let's see. I do have a question, actually, which I don't know if the outreach staff can answer, but, we're at this point because we have had a very robust outreach into community. So my question is then, moving forward, because I imagine that there may be other items on the ballot, how do we keep this issue at the forefront of residents' minds and salient? So to what extent can we continue to educate the public on this issue moving forward? And again, I emphasize educate, because I think that's where we want to be able to, provide the facts to residents.
If I may, and the city attorneys can certainly weigh in on this as well. Once the council does vote to refer the measure to the ballot, that it's a much more constrained kind of work that the city can do. Certainly, the city's within its rights to educate residents that the measure is on the ballot, the provisions of it, and to promote that. But it has to be in a very circumscribed, very neutral tone.
Okay. Yes?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that information provided has to be objective and impartial in nature. There could be no advocacy for or against any ballot measure.
Again, just to educate. And I think that based on the presentation, I think it sounds like, we've had, certainly that's been our approach. And so I guess my suggestion and comment to staff and the city is that to the extent that we can continue to be objective and neutral, I really would like to ask that the city strongly consider, continuing to educate the public about the matter. And certainly, I think that, yes, we need to work within the confines of what is permissible, because again, we want to operate in a very transparent and honest way. And so, I know that we have in our outreach, I know it was mentioned that we have included a very robust outreach that included a mailer to residents. And what I'd like to suggest is that, we continue that type of education outreach, to residents. It continues to be salient in their minds. Anyone comment? Yes.
Noted, and we will work back with our city attorney's office to see what we can do.
Okay, and you work, okay.
Yes.
And is this something that will be reported back to the council as well?
I'll take the question.
Yes, okay.
We understand where the line is drawn on how much staff can actually present to the public about this measure. We will make every effort to continue to educate the community This council meeting, starting at 8:05, is a very good educator to the public. They can easily jump online and watch the meeting, and they can be very well educated on how we got to where we're at. I think it's a great educational tool. So there are many ways to do that without us actually having to be out in the public, but we will be out in the public educating people.
Okay, thank you very much. Colleagues, do we have any further comments or questions?
I'm
yes?
sorry. I'm sorry. I had another thought.
Yes?
As staff, we are doing everything we can legally possible regarding this ballot measure. And even if council decides tonight to move it to the November election, I think it's very important for the council to also educate the community as well. As elected officials, I think you actually have a louder voice than staff and even a city manager. So we would also hope that you will help us educate the community as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Colleagues, yes, Councilman Chan, you have the mic?
Yes, thank you. And since in here we have, I think last time that when we put this on ballot, I was the person that drafted the argument on the ballot measure in the ballot book. But this time, since I'm leaving the office, at that election, and so, and of course, Councilmember Hans will be leaving at the same time. So I would like to suggest that maybe the Mayor Lowe, you take the lead in writing that argument, and then maybe all of us will sign on it, and we can, just like last time, I took the lead, but we all signed on the ballot because you all put in ideas and make changes and edit it and so forth and make it a good argument or a good message. So I would like to ask that since you're the sitting mayor, so it is good that you take the lead to write that draft, and then we all look at it, and maybe we can put inputs and suggestions, and then we make it a final product with all our names in the argument.
Mayor and Council, if I may interject, I don't want to I want to stick to the sequence because we can't explore an argument for or against until there's actually an approval to submit the proposition to the voters.
Okay.
So I think we definitely have to cover that, Councilmember Chan. If we could just put a pin in that, and that's all contingent on approval of submission of the measure to the voters at the beginning.
Okay.
Thank
Well, based on what you just advised, I mean, given that there are 6 items in the matter before us item, should we take each one, like bifurcate, take each one by one, or how should we?
It's the council's discretion. They can take the 4 resolutions together and subsequently, by minute order, address the preparation of the ballot, the argument for and the rebuttal. So essentially, you can take out number 2, put that at the end, and then as a whole, take all of the resolutions if that's the council's wish.
Okay. Well, so. Yes?
I'm sorry to interject. There's just one proposed grammatical modification, and this pertains to the first resolution, which presents the text of the ballot label, the ballot question, and it's on the 9th line, and it is the line that reads, allowing for other government use. And my recommendation is to remove the word for, so it would read, and allowing other government use by establishing, et cetera. So it's just removing that word for. It's grammatically unnecessary, and this will help ensure the proper flow and understanding of the question.
So would that be then, if it was a motion to accept staff or city attorney recommended amendments to the language?
Yes, to this initial resolution, placing the proposition on the ballot.
Okay.
That first resolution.
Okay. So if I understand correctly, then the motion then should be adoption of stipulations in item 1, 3, 4, 5, and include edits
You could say as
recommended.
as
Amendment
proposed to be
recommended
amended by the
staff.
city attorney.
Okay,
Is that your motion, Mayor?
I guess it is. Did that just make sense, what I just said? So-
Yeah, so I think perhaps to restate it, you're saying adopt the resolutions.
Adopt resolution with amendments, with recommended amendments. Okay. Adopt resolution with recommended, motion to adopt resolution recommended amendments.
And the resolutions, just to make sure I heard you correctly, Mayor, are for recommendations from the agenda 1, 3, 4, 5, 4, and 5. 1,
And
3, 4,
for recommendation items 1, 3, 4, and 5. Okay?
Second.
Okay. Moved by me. Second by Councilor House Liang. Yes, is that, okay, good. Thank you for making sure it sounds right. Okay. Vote then, please.
Votes unanimous, motion carries.
Subsequent motion to appoint Mayor Lowe as the designated person filing argument in favor of the ballot proposition. Would that be appropriate, Mr. Deputy City Attorney?
Yes.
Okay.
And maybe also signed by all council members. Do we need to add that in?
So the options are, you can have the council as a whole, or you appoint a particular member on your behalf, and that would take the priority. So if you want to just select the mayor, that would be one option.
Can we
And he
sign
could
on
prepare.
with his statement?
Absolutely, yeah. It's up to 5 signatures.
Okay.
So I would like to ask the maker of the motion to add that all council members sign on this argument.
Yeah, as I accept the amendment.
Okay.
So to assign the mayor as the designee for filing argument in favor of the ballot proposition for all council members to sign once complete.
Yes, I would second that.
Yes. Oops. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yes.
So I just want to
Oh,
kind
you
of
have
give you
second.
a brief history of what happened the last time.
Yes.
So basically, Councilmember Chan authored one of the measures, and it's filed with the clerk's office, and then the other council members would come by the clerk's office and then sign off on the arguments.
Okay.
So in this case, Mayor, you would draft it and then you would file it with the clerk's office. And there's also a deadline that you have to meet. Once you file it, then the rest of the council members, we reach out to them, and then they would swing by the clerk's office, and then they can sign off on it. I believe the last time there was a little bit tweaking of the argument right then and there. And then we also have to make sure that the word counts, when you
Okay.
meet the word count.
And remind me, or remind us, what is the timeline of when such an argument needs to be submitted to the clerk's office?
So once the, so we adopted this already. So if we decide to go in this direction, there's a deadline of 14 days after the adoption, which is August the 4th. So you will need to file something before August 4th so that the clerk's office can notify the rest of the council so that they can come by the office to sign on it.
So August 4th is the final deadline.
Correct.
Okay.
And then August 4th would be the deadline for all the signatures as well?
Yes.
Okay.
So hopefully, the mayor will file it a day earlier or so, and then that way, we'll have enough time to contact the rest of the council to.
Okay. No, procedurally, again, city manager, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to wait till the last minute, but nonetheless, would it be prudent if we were to, I mean, nothing to stop us from, say, filing it next Monday if I wanted to, because again, when I'm hearing that there has to be enough time for review and any possible amendments to the statement?
So the reason why we're doing that is because, if 3 of you meet, then it's going to be a conflict.
Okay.
And so that's the reason why they're designating you as the mayor
Okay.
to draft it.
Okay.
So there was just some minor amendments, but, the base of the text, the content was there.
So my question is, without the risk of violating, of course, like the Brown Act, how do we, although yes, I may be the designated author, but then how do we make sure then that there is a way to provide input without violating the Brown Act
You mean prior to you drafting, or?
after it's drafted?
So, I think that.
Yeah, I can jump in here.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So the Brown Act gives a green light here because you're acting upon a notice recommendation where one or more is appointed. So understandably, with other authors, there's going to be collaboration, which is allowed for argument authors. So I think it can be shared with the other members because that's what's being clearly and transparently authorized this evening.
It can be shared prior to submission to your clerk's office, or has to be
Yes,
prior to submission, so it can be shared.
yes.
Okay. All right.
Mayor, council members, we'll make sure that we do not violate any legal issues. We will help facilitate and make sure that we meet deadlines, and we'll make sure all the signatures are on there. As long as you take lead with our city attorney, we'll get things done.
All right. Very good.
Just on that note, as noted in the staff report, staff cannot be designated to, of course, assist with the drafting, but we can definitely let you know where the legal boundaries are on what activities are kosher for you all.
Okay, wait, repeat that. No, repeat that again, please. Say it again.
So the restriction on city spending money on advocacy extends to the use of staff. And so staff would be prohibited from assisting with the drafting of the argument, which you are being potentially tasked with. So you would be precluded from using staff and assisting with that drafting.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that, if I may, I'm certain the city manager and the city attorney will be quick to illustrate any violations that we may be having in that degree. I think that, the city staff, for example, clerk's office, and correct me if I'm wrong, can assist us in areas of word count, formatting, font size, those types of things that would be related to the printing and the format of it, but that they can't use any resources like, well, what do you think this first paragraph should sound like? Can we put, that type of assistance? So I think that, if I'm not mistaken, Deputy City Attorney is trying to articulate that and let us know that there is this line, we should be aware of it, and there are certain things that the clerk can do regarding this ballot, drafting of the ballot measure, and there's certain things that they can't do.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay.
So I think, do we still have a motion and second?
Already, yeah,
So we vote?
we vote.
Did we vote already?
No,
No. A motion's been made, right? Correct? Motion.
you make the motion.
I mean, and it was seconded?
I
And
seconded it.
Hans second. I make the amendment.
Okay.
So if you're okay with the amendment.
Fine, yes. Okay, thank you. No further.
Then we can vote.
All right, please vote.
I'm sorry, can I get a clarification as who made a motion and who?
Yeah, that Mayor Lowe would be assigned as the writer of the document in favor, and that it would be drafted for all city council members to sign on.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay, and yes, I will second that, yes. No.
No,
No, you made,
It's-
yeah.
it's
It's been
done.
moved and seconded, so.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's done.
thank you. Okay,
Just
okay,
the
yes.
vote.
I'm sorry, thank you for clarification. Okay, I know it's getting late. Okay, thank you. Okay, members, again, thank you, Vigal, for this very informative conversation. If there are no further comments or questions, please vote.
Vote unanimous, motion carries.
Thank you very much. Thank you.